The rain hammered against the windows of the black Bentley as it crawled through the congested streets of downtown Chicago. Inside the luxurious vehicle, 72-year-old Harrison Blackstone sat rigidly in the leather seat, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the financial reports spread across his lap. As the founder and chairman of Blackstone Industries, a multi-billion-dollar empire spanning real estate, technology, and manufacturing, Harrison had built his fortune through ruthless determination and an unwavering focus on success. "Sir, we're running about 20 minutes behind schedule," his driver James announced through the intercom. "The traffic is particularly heavy due to the storm." Harrison glanced at his platinum Rolex and frowned. He was supposed to be at the board meeting 15 minutes ago, where they would be discussing the quarterly projections and his son Michael's performance as CEO. At 45, Michael had been running the day-to-day operations of Blackstone Industries for the past 5 years, and while the company continued to thrive, Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing from his carefully constructed legacy. "Take the next right," Harrison instructed. "We'll go through the warehouse district. It might be faster." As the Bentley turned onto a narrow side street lined with old brick buildings and small shops, Harrison's attention was drawn to a commotion on the sidewalk ahead. A small crowd had gathered around what appeared to be a street vendor's cart that had been overturned by the strong winds. Boxes of fruit and vegetables were scattered across the wet pavement, and a young girl was frantically trying to salvage what she could from the mess. "Stop the car," Harrison commanded suddenly. James looked surprised, but immediately pulled over. "Sir?" Harrison was staring intently at the girl, who couldn't have been more than 16 or 17 years old. Even from a distance, something about her struck him as familiar. She had dark hair that was now plastered to her head by the rain, and despite her obvious distress, there was a determined set to her shoulders that reminded him of someone. "I'll be just a moment," Harrison said, opening the car door before James could protest. The rain immediately soaked through his expensive suit as he approached the scene. The girl was on her hands and knees, desperately trying to gather the scattered produce, while tears mixed with rainwater on her cheeks. She was clearly struggling, and the few people who had stopped to help were already moving on, eager to get out of the storm. "Excuse me," Harrison said, kneeling down beside her despite the damage it would do to his tailored pants. "Let me help you with this." The girl looked up, startled by the unexpected assistance. When their eyes met, Harrison felt his breath catch in his throat. The resemblance was unmistakable. She had the same piercing blue eyes as his son Michael, the same strong jawline, and the same stubborn tilt to her chin that Harrison recognized from looking in the mirror for 7 decades. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the rain. "But you don't have to help. You'll ruin your nice clothes." "Don't worry about that," Harrison replied, continuing to gather the scattered fruit. "What's your name?" "Emma," she said hesitantly. "Emma Rodriguez." "Well, Emma, I'm Harrison. What happened here?" "The wind knocked over my cart," she explained, her voice thick with frustration. "I was trying to get everything packed up before the storm got worse, but—" She gestured helplessly at the mess around them. Harrison looked more closely at the overturned cart and the scattered produce. It was clear that this wasn't just a hobby or part-time job for the girl. The cart was well maintained, but obviously old, and every piece of fruit that had been lost represented real money to her. "Is this your business?" he asked. Emma nodded, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "I've been running this fruit stand for 3 years, ever since my mum got sick. She can't work anymore, so it's just me supporting us both." The words hit Harrison like a physical blow. Here was a girl, barely out of childhood, carrying the weight of supporting her family on her shoulders. The determination in her voice, the way she refused to give up even in the face of disaster, it reminded him so strongly of Michael at that age, and of himself when he was building his empire from nothing. "Where do you usually set up?" Harrison asked, helping her load the salvageable produce back into the cart. "Corner of 5th and Madison, near the office buildings. The lunch crowd is good there, and the evening commuters usually buy something for dinner." She paused, looking at the damaged fruit with obvious distress. But I don't know how I'm going to replace all this. It took me weeks to save up for this inventory." Harrison stood up, his mind racing. The resemblance to Michael was so strong that it couldn't be a coincidence. But more than that, something about this girl's situation touched a part of him that he thought he had buried years ago, the part that remembered what it was like to struggle, to fight for every dollar, to carry the weight of other people's survival on his shoulders. "Emma," he said carefully, "I'd like to ask you something, and I hope you won't think I'm being inappropriate. Do you know anything about your father?" The girl's expression immediately closed off, and she looked away. "My father left when I was 2. My mom doesn't like to talk about him." "What's your mother's name?" "Maria Rodriguez. She used to work as a secretary before she got sick." Emma's voice was defensive now, as if she was preparing for judgment or criticism. Harrison felt his heart racing. 20 years ago, Michael had been involved with a young woman named Maria, who worked as a secretary at one of their subsidiary companies. The relationship had been brief and had ended badly when Michael chose to focus on his career instead of pursuing something serious with her. Harrison had supported that decision at the time, believing that Michael needed to concentrate on learning the business and preparing to take over the company. But now, looking at this girl who bore such a striking resemblance to his son, Harrison wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. "Emma," he said gently, "I think there might be something important we need to discuss, but not here, not in the rain. Would you be willing to come with me somewhere warm and dry where we can talk?" The girl looked at him suspiciously. "I don't know you, and I need to get home to my mom." "Of course, you're absolutely right to be cautious," Harrison said quickly. "Let me give you my business card, and you can call someone to verify who I am. I'm not asking you to trust me blindly." He pulled out his wallet and handed her one of his business cards. Emma's eyes widened as she read the name and title. Harrison Blackstone, Chairman and Founder, Blackstone Industries. "You're Harrison Blackstone?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "The Harrison Blackstone?" "I am, and I think there's a very good chance that you're my granddaughter." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Emma stared at him, her blue eyes, so like Michael's, wide with shock and confusion. "That's impossible," she whispered. "My father was just some guy who abandoned us. He couldn't be. Your father's name was Michael, wasn't it?" Harrison asked gently. Emma's face went pale, and she nodded slowly. "Michael Blackstone is my son," Harrison continued. "He's the CEO of Blackstone Industries, and if I'm right about this, that makes you my granddaughter." The rain continued to fall around them, but neither of them seemed to notice anymore. Emma was staring at Harrison, as if he had just told her that the sky was green, while Harrison felt a mixture of excitement and dread building in his chest. "I don't understand," Emma said finally. "If he's your son, if he's rich and successful, then why did he leave us? Why didn't he ever come back?" The pain in her voice was unmistakable, and Harrison felt a wave of guilt wash over him. If his suspicions were correct, then his family had failed this girl in the most fundamental way possible. They had allowed her to grow up in poverty, struggling to support her sick mother while they lived in luxury just a few miles away. "I don't know," Harrison admitted, "but I intend to find out. And if you are my granddaughter, then I'm going to make sure that you and your mother never have to worry about money again." Emma looked down at the business card in her hand, then back at Harrison. "Why should I believe you? How do I know this isn't some kind of scam?" "Because," Harrison said, pulling out his phone, "I'm going to call my son right now and ask him about Maria Rodriguez. And then we're going to get to the bottom of this, one way or another." As he dialed Michael's number, Harrison couldn't help but think about how dramatically his life might be about to change. For years, he had worried about his legacy, about what would happen to the Blackstone empire after he was gone. Michael was capable, but he had never shown any interest in starting a family of his own, and Harrison had begun to fear that the Blackstone name would die with his son. But now, standing in the rain next to a girl who might be his granddaughter, Harrison felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not just for his business legacy, but for something more important: the chance to be part of a real family again. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before Michael's familiar voice answered. "Dad? Is everything okay? You're supposed to be in the board meeting." "Michael," Harrison said, his eyes never leaving Emma's face, "I need you to tell me about Maria Rodriguez." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when Michael spoke again, his voice was tight with tension. "Dad, where are you? And why are you asking about Maria?" "Because," Harrison said quietly, "I think I'm standing next to your daughter." The silence on the phone was deafening. Harrison could hear his son's sharp intake of breath, followed by what sounded like a chair scraping against the floor. In the background, he could make out the muffled voices of board members asking if everything was all right. "Michael?" Harrison prompted. "Are you there?" Yes, I'm here." Michael's voice was strained. "Dad, I need you to tell me exactly what's happening. Where are you?" Harrison looked at Emma, who was watching him with a mixture of hope and terror in her blue eyes. "I'm on Warehouse Street, and I'm standing next to a 17-year-old girl named Emma Rodriguez. She's the spitting image of you at that age, Michael. Same eyes, same jawline, same stubborn expression you used to get when you were determined about something." "Oh, God," Michael whispered, and Harrison could hear the weight of realization in his son's voice. "Emma, is her mother Maria Rodriguez?" "Yes," Harrison confirmed. "And according to Emma, her father left when she was 2 years old. That would have been about 15 years ago, Michael, right around the time you ended things with Maria." There was another long pause, and when Michael spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "I didn't know. Dad, I swear to you, I had no idea Maria was pregnant." Emma's face crumpled at these words, and she turned away, but not before Harrison saw the tears starting to flow again. He reached out and gently touched her shoulder. "Michael, I'm going to bring Emma to the office. Cancel the board meeting. We need to talk about this as a family." "Wait," Emma said suddenly, pulling away from Harrison's touch. "I can't just leave. My mom is expecting me home, and I need to get the cart back to Mrs. Chen, who lets me borrow it." Harrison looked at the damaged cart and the girl's obvious distress. "What if I bought all of your remaining inventory? That would give you the money you need to replace what was lost, and it would free you up to come with me." "You want to buy fruit from a street cart?" Emma asked incredulously. "I want to help my granddaughter," Harrison said firmly. "And yes, I'm convinced that's what you are. The resemblance is too strong to be a coincidence." Emma bit her lip, clearly torn between curiosity and loyalty to her mother. "I can't just disappear. My mom will worry. Then we'll call her," Harrison said. "We'll explain the situation and ask her to join us. This affects her too." "She's too sick to travel," Emma said quickly. "She has lupus, and the medications make her really weak. Some days she can barely get out of bed." Harrison felt another wave of guilt wash over him. While his family had been living in luxury, his granddaughter had been caring for a chronically ill mother and running a business to support them both. The injustice of it made his chest tight with emotion. "Then we'll go to her," he decided. "After we talk to Michael, we'll all go to your home together. Your mother deserves to hear this from us directly." Emma looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but I want to call her first, to let her know what's happening." "Of course," Harrison agreed. He pulled out his phone and handed it to her. "Take all the time you need." As Emma dialed her mother's number, Harrison called James over. "Help us load this cart into the trunk," he instructed, "and then we're going to the office." "Sir, the trunk isn't really designed for—" "Make it work, James," Harrison said firmly. "This is important." While James struggled to fit the cart and remaining produce into the Bentley's trunk, Harrison listened to Emma's side of the phone conversation with her mother. "Mama, I know this sounds crazy, but I think I might have found my father's family," Emma was saying in rapid Spanish. "There's this man, Harrison Blackstone, and he says his son Michael might be my father." "No, Mama, I'm being careful. Yes, I have his business card. I'm going to go talk to them, but I wanted you to know first." The conversation continued for several minutes, with Emma's mother apparently asking detailed questions about Harrison and the situation. Finally, Emma handed the phone back to him. "She wants to talk to you," Emma said. Harrison took the phone, switching to Spanish himself. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Harrison Blackstone." "Mr. Blackstone," came a weak but determined voice on the other end. "My daughter says you think your son is her father. I believe that's a very strong possibility, yes. The resemblance is remarkable, and the timeline matches up with when my son was involved with someone named Maria Rodriguez." "Your son," Maria's voice was bitter now. "Your son, who promised he loved me, and then disappeared when his family decided I wasn't good enough for a Blackstone." The words hit Harrison like a slap. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I think there may have been some misunderstandings. My son claims he didn't know you were pregnant." "Of course he didn't know," Maria replied, her voice growing stronger with anger. "Because when I tried to tell him, I was informed by his secretary that he was no longer taking my calls. When I went to his office, security escorted me out. I got the message loud and clear. The Blackstones didn't want anything to do with me or my baby." Harrison felt sick. He remembered that time period, remembered encouraging Michael to focus on the business and cut ties with distractions. He had even suggested that Michael's assistant screen his calls more carefully. Had they inadvertently prevented Maria from telling Michael about the pregnancy? "Mrs. Rodriguez," Harrison said carefully, "I think there were mistakes made on all sides. But what matters now is Emma and making sure she and you are taken care of." "We've been taking care of ourselves just fine for 17 years, Maria replied proudly. "We don't need charity from the Blackstones." "It's not charity if she's my granddaughter," Harrison said gently. "It's family." There was a long pause, and when Maria spoke again, her voice was softer. "Bring her home safely, Mr. Blackstone, and if you hurt my daughter, I don't care how much money you have, I will make you pay." "I understand," Harrison said, "and I give you my word that I will protect her." After ending the call, Harrison and Emma climbed into the Bentley. The ride to Blackstone Industries headquarters was tense, with Emma staring out the window at the city passing by while Harrison tried to process the implications of what they had learned. "Are you nervous?" Harrison asked as they pulled up to the gleaming 60-story tower that housed his company's offices. "Terrified," Emma admitted. "What if he doesn't want to see me? What if he denies I'm his daughter?" "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Harrison said firmly. "But Emma, I want you to know something. Regardless of what Michael says or does, you're not alone anymore. If you are my granddaughter, and I believe you are, then you have family now. You have me." Emma looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Why do you care so much? You just met me an hour ago." "Me." Harrison was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain feelings he didn't fully understand himself. "When I was your age, I was in a similar situation. My father died when I was 16, and I had to support my mother and younger sister. I know what it's like to carry that weight, to feel like the whole world is depending on you. I built this company from nothing because I never wanted my family to struggle like that again." "But you succeeded," Emma pointed out. "You became rich and powerful." "Yes, but I also became distant. I focused so much on building wealth and security that I forgot about building relationships. I lost touch with what really mattered." Harrison looked at her seriously. "Maybe finding you is my chance to remember." As they rode the private elevator to the top floor, Harrison could see Emma taking in the opulent surroundings, the marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the priceless artwork lining the walls. Her expression was a mixture of awe and discomfort, as if she couldn't quite believe she belonged in such a place. "Mr. Blackstone," his assistant Margaret greeted them as they stepped off the elevator. "Mr. Michael is waiting in your office. He seems quite agitated." "Thank you, Margaret. Please hold all calls." Harrison turned to Emma. "Are you ready?" Emma squared her shoulders in a gesture that reminded Harrison so strongly of Michael that it took his breath away. "I'm ready." They walked down the hallway toward Harrison's corner office, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Through the glass walls, Harrison could see Michael pacing back and forth, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his tie loosened. When they entered the office, Michael stopped pacing and turned toward them. The moment his eyes met Emma's, the color drained from his face. "Jesus," he whispered. "You look just like you," Harrison finished. "Michael, I'd like you to meet Emma Rodriguez. Emma, this is my son Michael." For a long moment, father and daughter simply stared at each other. Harrison could see the recognition dawning in Michael's eyes, along with something that looked like grief. "You're so beautiful," Michael said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "You look exactly like your mother did when she was your age." "So you do remember her," Emma said, her voice carefully neutral. "Remember her?" Michael laughed bitterly. "Emma, I never forgot her. Maria she was the love of my life. Losing her was the biggest mistake I ever made." "Then why did you leave us?" Emma asked, and Harrison could hear 17 years of pain in those 5 words. Michael's face crumpled. "Because I'm an idiot. Because I was young and scared, and I let my family convince me that I had to choose between love and responsibility. And because I never knew you existed." The raw honesty in Michael's voice seemed to break through Emma's defenses. Tears started flowing down her cheeks as she looked at the father she had never known. "I used to dream about you coming back," she whispered. "When I was little, I used to imagine that you were a prince or a superhero and that someday you'd come rescue me and Mama." "I'm so sorry," Michael said, taking a step toward her. "Emma, I'm so incredibly sorry. If I had known about you, I would have moved heaven and earth to be part of your life. But you didn't know," Emma said, wiping her eyes, "because you stopped taking Mama's calls." Michael's face went white. "What?" And that's when Harrison realized that the truth was even more complicated than any of them had imagined. The tension in Harrison's office was palpable as the 3 generations of Blackstones faced each other. Michael looked like he'd been punched in the stomach, while Emma stood with her arms crossed, clearly struggling between hope and the protective walls she had built around her heart over 17 years. "Emma," Michael said carefully, "what do you mean I stopped taking your mother's calls?" "Exactly what I said," Emma replied, her voice gaining strength. "Mama told me that when she found out she was pregnant, she tried to call you. But your secretary said you weren't taking her calls anymore. When she went to your office, security threw her out." Michael turned to his father, his face a mask of confusion and growing anger. "Dad, do you know anything about this?" Harrison felt the weight of his past decisions settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. "Michael, you have to understand the context. You were 28 years old, and you had just been promoted to vice president. The board was watching your every move, waiting for you to prove yourself worthy of eventually taking over the company. What did you do?" Michael's voice was dangerously quiet. I may have suggested that you needed to focus on your career, that personal distractions could derail your professional development." "Personal distractions?" Emma's voice was sharp with hurt. "Is that what my mother was to you? A distraction?" "No, that's not what I meant," Harrison said quickly, but he could see the damage was already done. "I didn't know Maria was pregnant. If I had known—" "You would have what?" Michael demanded. "Allowed me to take responsibility for my own child. How generous of you." The sarcasm in Michael's voice cut deep, but Harrison knew he deserved it. "I thought I was protecting the family legacy. I thought I was ensuring the company's future. By destroying my personal life?" Michael ran his hands through his hair, his composure finally cracking. "Dad, I loved Maria. I was planning to propose to her, but every time I tried to talk to you about her, you found ways to redirect the conversation to business. You made it clear that she wasn't suitable for a Blackstone." Emma had been listening to this exchange with growing distress. "So both of you knew about each other, but neither of you knew about me." "I knew about your mother," Harrison admitted, "but Michael never told me she was pregnant." "Because I didn't know." Michael turned to Emma, his eyes pleading. "I swear to you, Emma, I had no idea. If I had known Maria was carrying my child, nothing, not the company, not my father's expectations, nothing would have kept me away from you. But you let them keep you away from her," Emma pointed out. "If you loved her so much, why didn't you fight for her?" Michael was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with the answer. Because I was a coward, he said finally. I was 28 years old, but I was still letting my father make decisions for me. I convinced myself that if I focused on building my career first, I could come back to Maria later when I was more established, more worthy of her. But later never came, Emma said softly. No, it didn't. By the time I realized what a mistake I had made, Maria had moved away. I hired private investigators to find her, but she had changed her name and disappeared completely. Emma's eyes widened. You looked for her? For years, Michael confirmed. I never stopped looking. I never stopped hoping that someday I would find her and be able to explain, to apologize, to try to make things right. Harrison watched this exchange with a growing sense of how badly he had miscalculated 17 years ago. In his determination to protect the family business, he had destroyed his son's chance at happiness and robbed himself of the opportunity to know his granddaughter. Emma, Harrison said quietly, I owe you and your mother an apology that I can never adequately express. My actions, my interference in your parents' relationship, deprived you of a father and deprived me of a granddaughter. I can't undo that damage, but I can try to make amends. How? Emma asked, her voice still guarded. By making sure you and your mother never have to struggle again, by paying for the best medical care for her lupus, by ensuring you can go to any college you want without worrying about money, by trying to be the grandfather I should have been all along. Emma looked between Harrison and Michael, clearly overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her circumstances. This is all happening so fast. This morning I was selling fruit on a street corner, and now you're telling me I'm part of one of the richest families in Chicago. You're not just part of it, Michael said, stepping closer to her. You're the most important part. Emma, you're my daughter. You're the family I never knew I had but always wanted. But I don't know how to be rich, Emma said, a note of panic creeping into her voice. I don't know how to live in your world. I don't even own clothes that would be appropriate for a place like this. Then we'll figure it out together, Michael said gently. Emma, I don't care if you want to keep selling fruit on street corners for the rest of your life. I just want to be part of your life, if you'll let me. Harrison watched as his son and granddaughter looked at each other, seeing 17 years of missed connections and lost opportunities hanging between them. But he also saw something else, the unmistakable bond of family, the recognition that transcended time and circumstances. There's something else we need to discuss, Harrison said carefully. Emma, your mother is sick, and from what you've told me, she needs medical care that's probably very expensive. Emma's defensive posture returned immediately. We manage fine. Mama has insurance through the state, and we make do. But what if she could have the best care available? What if money wasn't a factor in her treatment? She's proud, Emma said firmly. She won't accept charity. It's not charity, Michael said. It's family, taking care of family. Emma, I've missed 17 years of your life. I've missed birthdays and Christmas mornings and school plays and first days of school. I can't get that time back, but I can make sure that your mother gets the medical care she needs and that you have every opportunity you deserve. Emma was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the implications of what was being offered. What would you want in return? Nothing, Harrison and Michael said simultaneously. I don't believe that, Emma said. Rich people always want something in return. Harrison felt a pang at her cynicism, even though he knew it was probably well earned. Emma, what I want is the chance to know my granddaughter. What I want is to watch you grow into the remarkable woman you're clearly becoming. What I want is to be part of your life if you'll have me. And what I want, Michael added, is the chance to be your father, not to replace the life you've built with your mother, but to add to it. To support you and protect you and be proud of you the way I should have been doing all along. Emma looked around Harrison's opulent office, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows with their view of the city, the expensive furniture, the obvious trappings of wealth and power. This is all so overwhelming, she said finally. We don't have to decide everything today, Harrison said gently. Why don't we start by going to see your mother? I think it's time Michael and Maria had a conversation that's 17 years overdue. The drive to Emma's neighborhood was a study in contrasts. As the Bentley moved from the gleaming downtown business district to the modest working-class area where Emma lived, Harrison could see his son taking in the reality of how his daughter had grown up. The small houses with their tiny yards, the corner stores with barred windows, the general air of people working hard just to get by. "This is it," Emma said, as they pulled up in front of a small duplex with peeling paint and a chain-link fence around a postage stamp yard. As they walked up the cracked sidewalk, Harrison noticed that despite the modest surroundings, the little house was well maintained. The yard was neat, there were flowers in window boxes, and the front steps had been recently swept. Emma used her key to open the front door, calling out in Spanish, "Mama, I'm home, and I brought visitors." The living room was small, but clean and comfortable, with furniture that had clearly seen better days, but was cared for with obvious love. Family photos covered every available surface, and Harrison found himself drawn to a picture of Emma as a young child, grinning toothlessly at the camera. "Emma?" a weak voice called from the back of the house. "Who did you bring?" "It's okay, Mama," Emma called back. It's about my father." A few moments later, a woman appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on a walker. Harrison could see that Maria Rodriguez had once been beautiful. She still was, despite the obvious toll her illness had taken. But when her eyes met Michael's, the years seemed to fall away. "Miguel," she whispered, using the Spanish version of his name. "Maria," Michael replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." "Noi." And as Harrison watched his son and the woman he had loved reunite after 17 years, while his granddaughter stood between them like a bridge connecting past and future, he realized that sometimes the most valuable treasures were the ones you never knew you had lost. The Blackstone family was about to become whole again, and this time Harrison was determined not to let anything tear them apart. The end, important notice. This story is completely fictional and created for entertainment purposes only. All characters, events, situations, and circumstances are products of imagination and do not represent real people, living or dead, or real events. Any resemblance to actual persons or situations is purely coincidental. This heartwarming story explores themes of family, second chances, and how wealth and status can both divide and unite people. Through the characters of Harrison, Michael, Emma, and Maria, it shows how misunderstandings and pride can separate families for generations, but also how love and determination can bring them back together. The story demonstrates that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in the relationships we build and the love we share with those who matter most.